Justice was bound. A system grown from ancient days. Social grooming, sanity phrase. Panic sets in as people craze. The answer is the truth, it must be raised. Where do we find the truth and retort from Jesus Christ the Savior and the Webster Report? Where do we find the truth and retort from Jesus Christ the Savior and the Webster Report? Welcome to the Webster Report.
Hello and welcome to another Webster Report on this Sunday, the 15th of February 2026 on our Gregorian calendar. Well, I personally have had a lot of things happen this week that have, again, put my heart to the fire, had me thinking about certain things and, you know, where we're actually going in this world, and are we actually seeing what we're seeing, or are we conspiracy theorists still, or do we see things unfolding? Because at the moment we've got a massive argument going on in this country about whether different party gets into Parliament, into number 10. Rupert Law is saying all the right things. He's apparently setting up his own party now, and it's all about the immigrants. I seem to I wouldn't say get attacked, but you know, they're all moaning because I said, well, this fella's still going to ask you to pay your council tax and your gas, water and electric. Well, it's at least better. It's better than what we've got, because he's going to do this and she's going to do that. Well, he might do this. So we're back to he's going to stab you in the face, she's going to shoot you in the face, but this fella says he's only going to slap us. I think this one might be the best. But, you know, it's all hit and miss. But the definition of insanity is to keep repeating the same thing over and over again, but expect a different outcome. We've been doing it for a while. What do you think, Alex? How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. But yeah, I saw the thing about Rupert as well, and yeah, there's some merit in the argument that the lesser of several evils is better. But the problem is always, you know, that's what we thought about Trump regarding Biden and the Democrats. So superficially, it looks better. But we know with the optics that it can sometimes be a way of corralling people into relief of, oh yeah, that's much better because, you know, 70 to 80% of major issues seem to get addressed. But then if you do the maths and probabilities, everyone says, well, that's got to be better. But if the 20% that you're going to get is worse than what you had before, it might seem on one level like it's a lot better. But the question is, where's it all headed?
Well, at what point? I mean, I don't know how long it takes to, you know, organise a new party, register it, blah, blah, blah. You know, he already said we've got politicians emigrating. So we're getting politicians from other parties that are coming here now. Are they coming with their own ideas? Are they coming with a joint idea to actually make this country much better than where we're going? Is it, you know, I keep hearing chimes about it being a Christian country, Alex. I'm finding that kind of debatable. I mean, we've seen another fiasco from the Church of England where the Archbishop is giving, I don't know if it was $500,000 in reparations to people who we've colonised. And when we use the term colonise, you ought to think of Jim Ratcliffe and Manchester United now, because he said what, I don't know, that third bit of the population have been saying that these people are coming over from countries where it is strict Muslim, strict Islamic regimes, and they're fleeing them, but they want it here. And I don't get that, Alex. If you're fleeing something because it's bad, why do you come here and then want to recreate what you fled here? It doesn't make sense unless there's an agenda behind it.
Yeah, but I think on the question of the political substance or otherwise, you know, we look to politicians and we know that the dividing line should be that they take an actual interest in representing the people. So the problem with reform is something that seems better than every other option on the table is appealing because we're feeling oppressed by what was going on. But if it's just a different version of the same issue where the people are not really having their interests represented and politicians still think that the people are stupid idiots, because some of them are, let's face it, and then they just conclude that everybody is some sort of, you know, vegetable, then it's a problem. Now, how do we get to a position where people trust politicians again? I don't know the answer to that, because at the moment, the idea is that if anybody gets in power, there's got to be a catch. And, you know, how can an honest politics ever appear again in the world we're living in? And that's the problem that everybody has, because nobody believes anymore that an honest party will take up the reins of actually representing people. And then the anarchists have all along, and some of the libertarians said, it's not even government with a small g we want to get rid of governments. But I question whether your average human being is mature enough, adult enough to take on board the implications of not having somebody wiping their backside for them and changing the nappies, because we've been kept young, baby-like by paternalistic systems. And actually, we've profited by not taking responsibility in those areas. We wanted to go to work, whatever that is, earn our money and be left alone, which in some ways is admirable. If you work and then you're left alone to do what you want freely, yeah, but we don't live in a world where we can afford to do that. It's a luxury, which means people really need to participate in their world if they want to shape it. Most people just want to shape the bits of it that suit them, that work for them, that are relevant to them. But you know, this world's got 8 billion people on it. This country's got the best part of 70 million people in it. So if everyone's just doing I'm all right, Jack, what they'll be doing is going, yeah, well, as long as everything's going okay for me, I'm not bothered. I'll stick my head in the sand. And there's nothing constructive about that. There's no attempt to build a culture together. The best you get is me and my family, me and my friends. Well, I don't think we can afford to live in a world like that anymore, because that's what politicians do. Me and my friends, we're all cronies and we've got the reins of power. So we're just doing like everybody else does, looking after ourselves and our friends, and they're looking after us. It's just when we do it as politicians and politician cronies, we've got the power. But when the average person does it, they have no power. So something has to shift in the attitude, because it's not that the politicians are radically different than us, because all those politicians started off as, you know, a lot of the time, average Joes. Yes, some of them become millionaires, but they started off as average Joes, a lot of them, and they just got corrupted by the system. So ultimately, I don't think just because we're not politicians, we can fantasize that we'd be honest politicians if we got in power. The vast majority of people would sell out just the same and become one of the cronies and protect their interests. And this is a problem that we're dealing with. It's the problem with the human heart, Paul, and it's the problem that no political system, no mode of social organisation will ever be able to sort out. It's in the domain of spirituality, faith, God, whatever, your convictions, your authenticity, your values, and politics doesn't really speak to that. It sometimes rhetorically, you know, gets up on a platform and speaks with a loud hailer, but there's no real values and commitment and robustness in politics, unfortunately. That's why we've got to change.
Well, it shows that this system only allows people who will do as they're told, because when you mention the word empower, these people shouldn't have any power. You know, the power's meant to be with the people. These are employees. We forget that we pay these people to do this, and yet they get all the kickbacks. They're using all the benefits that they get within the system and when they're not in the system. So when they're participating in commerce, like Keir Starmer MP, that's a business, he's going to get all the kickbacks and benefits through that. But when Keir goes home, that useless idiot goes back to his own house, do you think he's paying council tax, gas, water and electric, Alex? Do you think he's paying for those utilities? Because he possibly could be. You know, we've got Black Belt Barrister who came out 2 years ago telling everybody had to pay council tax. Yet if he's a barrister, he should be able to understand that it's all commercial language that they talk about what council tax is paid for. So he's either got an agenda or he's not as black belted as he thinks he is. So we've got all these people who, and you know, there's a lot of groups, the council tax groups and stuff like that, where people are, they're not looking to get out of anything, Alex. They're looking to not die. They're looking to be able to provide food for the family. But when you're being told that you owe all these thousands of pounds in taxes that they can't pay, so that especially people with equity in the properties, they're threatening them with pieces of paper that have only been through a court in a room, not even at a court itself. So we've got all these lies that are all being enforced. And then we've got all the idiots who enforce it against the people. So you've got people policing people, just like over COVID. That was the test. They're going to easily grass people up over council tax and bills. You know myself that I had it from family members. Oh, my bills go up because of you. You know, these idiots that don't want to think. They just want to go, well, I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going. I'll keep my head down and everything will be all right. I think Martin Niemöller said that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't really know what it's going to be possible for us to do about this is we talked about it many times as individuals, and you know, what are the outlets that we've got to come together collectively? Not that many. This is why we're doing this. Just, you know, rattling the cage. People use whatever methods they can.
What can you do, Alex? If you know, I did a talk with where Andrew Bridgen was the main speaker, and he mentioned winter allowance that people shouldn't be worried about. Not only is it not applicable to each family or anything like that, because it's a business loan to help through winter. It's so businesses can get through winter. That's what the allowance is for. It's got to be paid back. Who's paying it back? Well, if they're giving it to the general public and pretending they're businesses, they're going to take it back off the taxpayers. So they're just playing a game that, as long as you carry on thinking that you're somebody that you're not on paper, and you think that that paper person is you, because that's what people are taught, then it's very hard to break that spell. But you get so many people who try and bring it in for this and that, and all you've got to do is this, you know, just don't pay and tell them you've no contract. And then explain that statutes and acts only apply with consent. You can teach all that very easily. It's so easy to understand. But you're going into a courtroom and saying that. Nothing good will come of it. So if you go into, because if you don't go into a court, yes, you can get away for years without doing anything. They just wait until there's only you left. Martin Niemöller told us. So if that's the case, like we did 10, 15 years ago, we went into the court system because we didn't go in with I have no contract. We went in with remedies. We wanted to stop council tax. We wanted to stop people not being able to panicking because they can't pay for the gas, not putting it on. It just wasn't good enough for me, Alex. You know, people have tried to use other ways, you know, just paying standing orders, and as long as you're paying something, they'll leave you alone, or they'll at least not harass you. But for me, it was beating the simple aspect is that you shouldn't be paying. Are you a creditor? Yes. Then why are you paying bills? Because everybody does. Well, there's the solution, right, in a nutshell. But what do we do about it? People always turn to me, Alex, say, oh, so you don't pay for anything. Why is it always down to me to prove I'm not doing something? If you need to say, what do you do with this? What do you do with that? You're not doing anything, because my information's been out there 15 years. You know, I've had people contacting me over a video I did 10 years ago saying, we can't get these gyros now. They were like confetti then, Alex. But nobody was interested. And now people are interested. It's always somebody else's fault. And I've honestly, I'm done with it. Anybody who wants to argue about that stuff anymore, just go away and argue. Because I know what a remedy is. I've got common sense. If a court clerk tells me I've got a remedy, I'm going to believe him.
Yeah, I hear your frustration, Paul, and I don't really know. There are various. I mean, I had my experience, as many truthers have, of the Light Truth paper, and attempted at one point after COVID to get some traction on how we could get some organised action, because its circulation was, I think it was already over 100,000, and of course it was bypassing digital media, so the monitoring aspect was gone, posted through someone's letterbox. But already back then, in end of 2021, they were all, yeah, if you want to do that, you're gonna have to put an ad in to the marketing department. It costs you about 900 quid. And if you can, I'm not advertising the product, mate. You know, this is Darren Nesbitt, bless him. You know, I try to say, Luke, you know, I email him privately and go, you know, Luke, this could be a real platform for concerted action, for write an article. And they're always asking for people to write articles. So I said, well, an article could be written. There could be a plea for people to come together and on a day, like a national strike or something. And then it could, you know, people could have a sense that if they came together, they could all stop with the same documentation produced, they could all stop paying council tax, because they know, there's a solidarity through that circulation. It was just an early idea that could have built momentum. But straight away, nothing, no reply, no interest. Well, the one reply, and when I emailed to clarify further, it wasn't an advertisement, it was an article in line with the Light Truth paper's values. Tumbleweed moment, didn't hear anything. So even they were already going, how can we generate revenue here? This guy's contacting us. Or if he wants to put an ad in, I didn't say I wanted to put an ad in. So if that's people who are claiming to be an alternative source of news, return to print media, what's their agenda? Producing articles that look slick, competing with mainstream media to try and find a niche in the market. I mean, is that professionalization? Is that to increase circulation? What's the actual goal? As soon as you get human beings involved, they become territorial. They want to build empires. It's always the same thing. Every single time, people get corrupted the same way. And that's like a metaphor of building Babel again. We want to build this structure. We want to make a name for ourselves. We want glory and fame. Yeah, there you go. So I don't know how these things don't get corrupted. I don't see how any organized system that we put in place or any resistance we put in place isn't going to become a part of the problem. I just don't see it.
Yeah. Well, I always bring it back to the fact that because we've been taught to pay gas, water, and electric, because we pay tax that isn't applicable to the property that we live in, and the only reason that they can presume that, Alex, is because we've been taught to register the property in such a way that it can be presumed, and then we're taught to act as the shopkeeper, and that money is all taken from people, and it has funded our imprisonment, or it's building our prison, and it's created the national debt, and people want to argue about it. No, there is no national. Of course, there's a national debt. If you're giving money to your HMRC in the coffers, and the HMRC are giving money to the government, and then the government can't say what they've spent it on because you're deciding to not fill in that gyro. So that can't be vouched for. So that money's gone, and they can't put it back into the creditors. So from the debtors book, they put all the prices up in the debtors book to try and balance the creditors book. And it can't be done. But considering everybody's classed as debtor, that's why everybody's bills are going up instead of just people's shops. And during that time, because everybody's paying council tax, Alex, O2, Virgin, all these big companies can get all tax kickbacks. They don't have to pay business rates and stuff. They'll get kickbacks on that, and they pay the taxes offshore. So the taxpayer is funding everything: illegal immigration, climate change, all the bailiffs, all the courts are all being funded through the fraudulent aspect of having these funds. I can't say stolen, because they're there for you to go and say, hey, what are you doing with this? We have a shadow cabinet who get the same money, who have the same issues. Why aren't they saying, well, what have you spent that on? Well, we spent it on, well, we didn't spend that on this. Why are we not having this debate? It's because the two parties in the House agree on everything under here, and then we debate everything up here. And this is nothing stuff. They all agree on it. That's why it's interesting. What is Reform agreeing on? They said about immigration, but then they talk about jobs. You've got to get these things in. You've got to get maybe masks coming back. Even Reform were talking about that. Farage going on and on about those jobs, and then he brings in a vaccination czar from. It's just, you can't write this stuff. But why can't people see it, Alex? It's like the delusion is so great that you can say politics is corrupt and everybody will agree with you. Banking's corrupt, everybody will agree. Courts are corrupt, everybody agrees. But when we don't know what to do, we say, well, we've got to protest. So we go and apply for a license to set up a protest, to follow all these rules, wave our flags, stamp our feet, and then we all go on, like you said, Alex, We all go home thinking we've accomplished something because we've walked around waving flags and protesting. And then all those who did that will point to the people who say that's a waste of time, saying, well, where were you? Da, da, da. Well, a protest is just a legal acceptance. You're applying, you're begging, can I protest about this? Well, when a child is going to bed, I don't want to go to bed. Guess where he goes? He ends up in bed. So that's all a legal protest is. You can protest all you like, but it's coming. How do we reject? We don't know. So people get to a point of frustration, and then people who can't articulate have only got violence. And that's what they hope for, because they're hoping that we can't articulate it. The problem that they've got is they've woken a lot of people up who can articulate. A lot of people who've dug in the trenches for over 10 years in this court system. People who were ridiculed 10 years ago. People who are now being held up and saying, hey, you were right. You know, that's no justification, Alex. It's no justification for somebody who's been barracked for 10, 15 years about being an idiot and ripping people off and not knowing what they're talking about. Then all of a sudden, it's there. Everybody knows. Everybody, you know, it was shocking when somebody went, do you know what? They're spraying stuff in the sky. That was 4 years ago. Somebody said that to me. And I'm like, where'd you go with this? It's like, we were talking about this years ago, and then all of a sudden we're still getting people who are going into courtrooms and saying I have no contract. 10 years ago we were saying don't do that, but now people have woke up. They're going back and finding all those old things, TikTok videos of girls from Manchester going, just change your meters right and don't tell them because it's all free. You know, what do you say? Where'd you go? But we've got all this money going on, and we've not even gone out of the country yet. But I've got this video. Let's hope this works. See which one I've got. This is it.
Good morning. I'll keep this brief. Yesterday, I was in the High North, confirming that the UK is doubling its Marines and its major military exercises there. This morning, I'm here at NATO, confirming that Britain will play a central part in NATO's Arctic security mission, Arctic Sentry, to strengthen security in the region. This afternoon, I'll be confirming that Britain is providing an extra £500 million in urgent air defence to Ukraine. This is Britain being a force for good in the world, building a new deal for European security within NATO. And I'm proud of the UK's armed forces. I'm proud of the UK's leadership. I'm proud of the UK's commitment to our allies. We will back you. We will defend you. We will fight with you in this new era of threat and hard power. Thank you.
Hard power, Alex. Hard power. What's hard power? So £500 million from UK taxpayers. Well, he doesn't say taxpayers, he just says from UK, as if it's like coming out of his bank account. So he's announcing it, how proud he is and all this. What's it going? What has all that got to do with us? Well, we're paying for it. How are we paying for it? Well, we're being taxed, and there's nothing coming back in. I can't drive down a road without a pothole in my town. Not one. Even the ones that have been fixed, so-called. They've ripped the town centre in Leah Park. We've got a baker's that's been here for 36 years on one of the main routes in. Because they decided to build a bike lane, that only 19 people from the entire community said, yeah, that'd be good. Nobody else wanted it, but they still built it. 36 years, all the passing traders decided that they won't go that way anymore because it's still not quite finished. So they're shutting after 36 years. That, for me, is purposely done, or at least a bonus of purposely ripping town centres and got idiot taxpayers going, yeah, everybody's going to pay tax. I mean, pay it, but take your benefits at least. If there's no benefits to you paying tax, what are you paying tax for? There's meant to be benefits. If you agree to be in this system, and before everybody says, oh, that was a birth certificate and you got signed up and you got this number and you used it, okay. I was okay with all that. Yes, I've done all that, but I've got a check here for my gas bill attached to my gas. All I've got to do is sign and date it. Let's sort this out now. You know, everybody wants to give Rupert Lowe a chance to go in number 10 based on like maybe one subject, but we don't know what he's going to do with the other stuff yet. But nobody would do that with the one gyro. Let's try this, because if we stop paying for bills and we hold HMRC to account over it, and we're in a courtroom who can't go away from their own legislation, .gov.uk, I couldn't see a downside to it. There would have been the balance, the national debt would have been flattened, so that would have been more revenue for more infrastructure, more business, more tax, more employment, more tax. And if you're putting that back into the country, you can't go wrong. But if we're only bleeding funds out to other countries, which is what we're doing, which is why Keir Starmer said he'd rather be in Davos than in Parliament, it's because these people don't have any allegiance to any country. You know, Albania had an AI minister in the EU Parliament, Alex. AI. Somebody's typing that stuff into the AI. That Albanian AI is not sat there on her own going, I wonder what I can talk about in Parliament today. It's all put straight through, and she's acting as if she's real and people are listening to it. On top of that, we don't know what a woman is. Alex, the world has gone.
Yeah. Well, I want to just go back to a comment that was interesting. There have been a few in the chat. And David Callahan said, one comment, Webby, is the court a tennis court or a basketball court? And he says it's the latter. Think about it. I thought that was an interesting statement. Obviously, I can't read his mind, and he might elaborate further. But normally, when we think of court, you know, you'll have basically the system in whatever capacity against the individual or arbitrating between two people in dispute or whatever. And it tends to be the case is made, it's bounced over, the other side makes its counterpoints, and so on and so forth, like two individuals batting a ball over a net. And we tend to think of it in those terms. But actually, on both sides of the fence or the net, if it were a basketball court, in theory, you could say, well, it means that they're all collaborating on the other side of the whole court. And, you know, you've seen them move the goalposts when you were getting close, and they'll collaborate to do so. But also, I suppose, human beings could, you know, who are on the receiving end, who are going in to try and get some sort of, like you say, remedy. And that maybe it's a better metaphor to think of it in terms of a basketball setup than a tennis one.
Yeah, I can agree. It's a lot quicker moving. It's a lot less stiff. You've got to be very fluid. But it was quite simple when you've got the root, when you've got the foundation. If you just stand on that foundation, it doesn't matter where they take you. You know, when with our council tax, they took us from the 92 Local Government Finance Act to the 1967 Rates Act, pointed to a section there that was still talking about commercial property. So it didn't matter where we go, it was all commercial. And in section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, it tells you that there is no list, and there is no list required to show any property to be exempt from non-domestic ratings. So if there's no list to show that there is property exempt, then nobody knows if there's any property, because the government say, no, your property is rateable. The valuations office tells you, But the VOA told me that my house is wholly domestic. Then why are they rating it as Band A, council tax? What are they doing? They're attaching some kind of commercial aspect to this property. We've talked about hereditaments, and we've talked about, well, it's the highway, that's a public highway, that can be used for commerce, so this property's on that, so that could be part of that. Well, that would mean that every car that's go past us is using the road for business and storing stuff in my house as part of that business, because it's the only way that council tax could apply if it's related to any businesses. So I had to find out how I would say they're doing it. And when you know that land registry are taking people's property without signatures, you know, you buy a house, you sign it, it's witnessed, the contract. They sign it, it's witnessed. You exchange contracts, then title deeds are changed. Well, we had title deeds changed without any signatures. And land registry said, we only need a county court stamp, which you can go to a stationery shop and have a county court stamp made up tomorrow. When I asked land registry, would they help me steal people's property if I did that, they said it doesn't quite work like that. So basically, when we use those titles, Mr, Miss, Mrs, which we are taught to use to register, we're registering a property that can be used as commercial. And under presumption, they presume that it is. So there's no fraud there until you tell them that it's not being used for business. Now, if they'd have just said, oh, right, that's okay, we're not charging you. But then Dave next door would have gone, they did what? Well, I don't do any business. I'm going to go and do it. Well, they couldn't have that, Alex. They couldn't have that. So they had to fight it. And that's why they look as bad as they do now. You know, I mean, if you look at it, and it's happening all over, because when you ask questions, it's not profitable for many people to go into these places and make accusations or even make claims. I only made that claim because I had a check. You can't give me a check that needs signing and giving back to you under the bills of exchange and then say, no, I don't want it. You can't do that. But how do you enforce it? Well, I was told I had to become a claimant and sue the utility company who made £3.4 billion profit that year. You know, it shouldn't have to be like that. It should have been that simple. Sign date, gone. But they've fought it. Pam Bondi over in America is being asked about these Epstein files, and she's shouting and accusing people and talking about something totally different. And it makes her look so weak that she's shouting at people with nothing. I mean, hopefully Taylor will be able to tell us about this, because these optics are falling out round their ankles. Is that part of it? We'll just have to wait and see. So we'll try this next one.
JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, to threaten to pull their headquarters out of the UK if the government put tax upon bankers' bonuses. We know that a conversation then happened between Jamie Dimon and the then Chancellor Alistair Darling. How astonishing do you think that chain of events is?
In an ordinary sane world, that would be astonishing, but I think, frankly, it's eerily reminiscent of what we've seen also under this government. We saw great investigative reporting from Ethan Stone at Open Democracy, showing that JP Morgan have tried to use the same tactics against lobbying against Rachel Reeves imposing higher taxes on the banking sector after their windfall profits. Now, in Reeves's case, unfortunately, it seems as though she did relent. But for Alistair Darling, luckily he stood up for the public interest. But it is very worrying that banks feel able to use their influence to try and dictate elected government policy. And it's all the more worrying that Peter Mandelson, a member of the government at the time, used his influence to facilitate that. It really begs the question of whose side are politicians like Mandelson on? Are they on the side of the British public and the public interest, or are they on the side of their friends in high places?
Another of the allegations.
So there you have that information is being given away that helps these bankers, and then they can help influence policy by what? How do they influence policy? Do they give money? Do they have people inside, like Mr. Mandelson, whose husband was given money by Jeffrey Epstein? So we have Epstein that links all these. Apparently, our mainstream media, Alex, is insisting that Epstein's a Russian asset. You know, unless these Russians all wear small hats, I'm not quite sure. But you've got Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father, Pergamon Printing, does all the literature for the education system, and he was a Mossad asset. So we're starting to see these links coming in, and again, if we are looking at optics, Alex, if we're watching this play out, so that it's being played out so openly and so dumbly, you know, I mean, right in layman's terms, so everybody could see this playing out, so it'll wake people up, like what Taylor says. It's, you know, it's getting pretty messy, but I don't see people waking up to it. They all talk about it, but it's like they talk about that over there, but they don't associate it with this over here. Does that make sense, Alex?
Yeah, it's a common phenomenon. Obviously, it dominates people's minds. I mean, when I watch any political discourse now, they're just really talking about things that don't really exist. I mean, they're getting a bee in the bonnet about things, and it doesn't mean that there isn't truth in the position. It's just they end up going down rabbit holes and emphasizing the truth in such a way that it becomes all consuming. And the problem is people lack the ability to step back and say, well, so what? So what? They get drawn into the theatre, and then from just being kind of idle spectators, they become like some strange cheerleaders from the side, you know, taking sides. Yeah, I agree with him. Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Yeah, that's so true. And then it's like, you know, it might be Trump derangement syndrome, or it might be, you know, Trump is, you know, a hero. And speaking of which, our cheerleader for Mr. Donald Trump has arrived in the building.
He's not cheerleading.
He's not got his
He with us, Taylor.
He's not got his pom-pom yet. He needs his pom-pom.
Hey, what's up, guys?
How's things, mate?
Doing all right. How about you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Have you heard much?
No, I've been multitasking. I'm going to be honest. I've been a bit busy. Going between different things. So,
Alex, do you want to fill in what we've been talking about?
Well, just the general political scene, but more, I suppose, UK based, and we've touched on Epstein a little bit, and I'd be interested to hear, Taylor, what your take is on the latest sightings of Epstein.
Say again? Say that last part again.
What do you make of the recent sightings of Epstein with his security detail?
Well, I think that for us, it's more of what we already knew, of course. But again, the movie, as I always say, the movie is not for us. It's for the normies. So this Epstein stuff, you know, we have so many different parts of this movie playing out at the same time, moving from scene to scene. I truly feel we're heading for the climax, as long as and tedious as it's been. With this Epstein stuff, we got we got more and more coming out about the Democrats and their donors, as well as these big corporate heads being linked to child sex trafficking. It's really amazing just how far we've come from the days of 2017, 2018, when back then, and let alone before that, when we were talking about Epstein, and people would call us nutty, crazy conspiracy theorists, because 9 out of 10, like, most 95% of the public wouldn't even know who Epstein is, and so we've come so far to the point of where we're kind of getting we're almost sort of getting our vindication in a way. Not if you think about it, because like I said before, nobody knew nobody knew who Epstein was, or what these files are, or the child sex trafficking, and now it's becoming mainstream, especially when it like even the snuff murder porn is starting to come out, because we have people like what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene through Twitter with her quote unquote falling out from Trump, which is all play acted. We have the controlled media like CNN and all them constantly bringing up the Epstein files, and now we have the people on the left, the people that mocked us before and called us conspiracy theorists. Now they're the ones going out and demanding that the Epstein files get released, and are the ones getting pissed off that Pam Bondi continues to quote unquote fight against the release of the files, which as we know is all play acting. It goes back to the usual idea of controversy creates conversation. That's really what it comes down to, especially when it comes to this specific issue, because we can't have you can't have Trump coming out and saying, okay, I want to release all the Epstein files, I want to take down all these Democrats, because if he does that, the problem is, as Hugh said from one of his very first posts, we cannot Trump cannot be linked to this, which basically means that he can't be he can't be the one going out and pushing for these files. He has to look like he's against it, because otherwise the public's not going to believe him, because they're going to say, oh, Trump, I don't believe this, I don't believe any of this stuff, Trump's just going after his political enemies, he's vindictive, he's just going after the Clintons, that whole thing. So this whole thing really is being play acted in a genius way to reverse psychology, getting the public to want the very thing that they accused us of being conspiracy theorists over for so many years, and they don't even know it. So at the end of the day, I think this is absolutely amazing. Not to mention also with each quote unquote batch that comes out, while we don't exactly get the smoking gun that we're looking for, like the camel that breaks the thing that breaks the camel's back, we do get more and more stuff coming out which implicates the elites and the Democrats especially in this whole thing. I mean, recently we just had Bill Gates being tied to it do it all. So it's just absolutely amazing, if you ask me. I think that it's I think this is getting really interesting. Though it is tedious, of course, and I'm hoping at the end of this movie it comes very, very soon, and that we get the big drops. Because I'm not gonna lie, if it was up to me, but this is just me personally, and I'm sure this is not gonna happen. But if it was up to me, I would show Frazzle Drip on television and force everyone to fucking watch it. I would be like, you guys have made fun of us for so long, you don't believe it? Here, watch Frazzle Drip, and you'll see what I mean. That's what I would do. But I know they're not going to do that because for obvious reasons. But so, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. And Paul, apparently Piers Morgan got a shock when he was called out for being in the Epstein files himself.
Did he? Well,
yeah.
This is how I'm thinking, Taylor. You're saying that we all know it's a play acting, right? Pam Bondi looked really unhinged in an official hearing. She looked very unhinged, and she was talking about things that weren't actually anything to do with what they were actually there for. The interesting thing for me is, out of these files, is they've redacted people who were named in these files. They've redacted the people who were so-called let's call them perpetrators, and didn't redact all the victims' names and their details. They left all them out. And I think they got one Saudi Arabian royal talking about a torture video. But in these files, Trump has allegations made by eyewitnesses that have never been investigated. Now, is that part of the plan? That's one question. And if it is, what part is that going to play? Because it makes Trump look dirty. Is there going to be something that will be like a shining example, say, it was all a ruse. We just wanted you to think Trump was dirty type thing.
Exactly.
Those are the two questions about that. And just on a caveat, because you mentioned some of the mainstream going on about the conspiracy theorists that have come out now. I did see Bill Maher talking about where could he find out how to apologise to Q. I don't know if you saw that.
That was amazing. Oh my goodness. Bill Maher is like, okay, so I don't know whether it's really him and put under submission or he's been switched out. I don't know. I personally think it's a 2.0, but that's neither here nor there. But oh my goodness, the fact that the Q is coming back into the mainstream is absolutely amazing. And you know, on a similar tangent, I also want to bring up this whole Nancy Guthrie thing as well, because it kind of ties into this in a way, because we have because like what are people looking up when they look up Nancy Guthrie and Savannah Guthrie? They're looking at their connections to the Clintons, and as well as that famous interview from what was it, like 2020 2022, something like that, when she interviewed Trump and this was clearly a scripted interview where she was asking, she was getting on Trump about QAnon, saying, do you like attacking and being aggressive and saying, oh, do you believe in QAnon and yada yada yada, and Trump cleverly said that he doesn't know what QAnon is. And I just want to mention, I mean, you've seen that interview, right?
So again, which one?
The one with I think it was Savannah Guthrie and interviewing Trump a few years ago when she was confronting him about quote unquote QAnon.
No, I haven't seen that. Yeah, I've just remembered the name because didn't the mum just get kidnapped or something?
That's the narrative. Yeah. But anyway, I really found it interesting, just like the way that Trump phrased that. He says, "I don't know I don't know QAnon," and it's very the phrasing matters, because there is no such thing as QAnon. There's Q and there's anons, so two different things. But regardless, I just wanted to point out that this whole thing is now Q looks like even it might be vindicated in the narrative space. It's yet to be seen, because we've only just started going down that path. Who knows if it will continue? But regardless, I don't expect it to become mainstream knowledge that Biden was a fake in a mask and that his administration was fake and that this was all a military operation and all that stuff. I doubt that will actually become public. But regardless, I just find this whole thing to be interesting. You like, again, with Bill Maher, he's been he's one of those he has one of those kinds of audiences where you have so many different groups of people that the military operation is trying to help unplug from the matrix and psychologically fix them from their brainwashing. You have the Fox News watchers, so the MAGA normies. You have the Alex Jones types who are in the alternative media, but at the same time they're like in a halfway house, like the Alex Jones types. And then you have the hardcore the hardcore libtards that watch CNN and MSNBC, who are pushing that whole who are pushing the idea that the halftime of the Super Bowl was a great thing, and not telling you that the guy Bad Bunny was dropping F-bombs and talking about booties and stuff on Prime, in the halftime of the Super Bowl during his song. So we got people leaving, more and more people leaving the MSM for that. And then on top of that, you also have the people who watch talk shows like The View or Bill Maher or Jimmy Kimmel, these comedians or talk show hosts. These are all different audiences, and the operation is targeting each of them in their own unique ways in order to bring them along in their own at their own pace. And Bill Maher definitely seems like that he's being used in that regard in order to bring along the comedian crowd. in order to try to help wake them up in a way, because it's not just the Q thing that he said. He's also said several other things which really are pushing people either away from him or pushing, and the people that still watch him, pushing them to know certain things that they didn't. Like, for example, when he complimented Trump, saying that, oh, he's not as bad of a guy as people make him out to be, that whole thing.
Mm.
So it's really interesting. All of these different fields are being tackled.
You're right. It is interesting, but it's getting very messy. And like I say, if the European bankers in the UK doesn't know that we're beaten, we don't know we're beaten yet because we're still going along with everything. As you didn't see it, but we're giving £500 million towards NATO to defend Europe. From what? From Russia? But that's what I mean, Taylor. You saying so they say that. That's so they say. It's still happening here. People are still not being able to pay for things. People are still going to be struggling because we haven't got a saviour. I know people locally who want Trump to come here and take over the country, like he went to Venezuela, threatened Colombia, and go to Greenland. Everybody wants this saviour. Everybody wants this saviour, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Go on, mate.
Before you continue, I just want to mention. Notice how those storylines have completely left the narrative space over the last month or so since they happened. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? It's like all of a sudden they just completely left the narrative space. No one's talking about them anymore.
About what? About who?
The Venezuelan situation or Colombia?
No, that's what I mean. You're right. We have all these situations. I mean, Iran's died down. That will be coming up, I would say, this week. They'll threaten Iran again, or they'll do something. But that's what I'm saying. We're watching all this. We're still seeing it happen. It's not waking anybody up, mate. It's not waking people up over here. It's not waking my family and friends up.
I wouldn't really say that. I would. I just.
I would say that. I would say that because I'm talking to them. They haven't got a clue. They haven't got a clue what you're talking about, man.
Yeah.
They don't know. They don't know anything because our mainstream media that these people watch do not show anything like that. It's all about Andrew at the minute, mate. We've got people coming out saying, well, ex-royal protectionist said, yeah, he should be held to justice. So somebody's going to get thrown under buses, and we're going to watch all these. That's the optic that I'm seeing being played over here, but they're still raping us financially, Taylor. We're getting nothing. So I'm waiting and watching for what you're saying, because even though I think whatever comes along, there's going to be a peace and safety type thing announced. But that, if people fall for that, that's where we're all going to get tied into this stuff. But it is interesting to see what's going to be coming out now, because it certainly is speeding up. Have you got anything to present to us of the latest?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of things I would like to present. But before that, though, what I will say is that we should not. I've learned this just from various different methods, that we shouldn't be judging the overall state of the public mind or how far that everyone's come when it comes to the vast awakening process, just based on our own personal field of vision. So like, for example, we shouldn't judge how everyone else in the country is coming along just based on our, let's say, our friends, our personal group, or a bunch of libtards, or you have a mom or dad that's libtarded, Trump derangement syndrome. Because realistically, that's if you look at the data, that's just not how the public is going along. The statistics don't lie. At the end of the day, again, I don't live over there in the UK, so I can't speak. So I'm not going to speak against your personal experience. All I'm saying is that you should just keep in mind that our own personal experiences don't make up the definition of the whole. But I will say this, though, about the financial situation. It's pretty bad over here too. We're struggling.
Yeah, just one sec. do you live by your own statement? Because you're saying that you're saying that the whole is what you're saying, but you individually can't say that. That's what you just said.
No, what I'm saying is that just because we have that we should not judge what's happening with everyone else just based off of the people that we know on a personal day-to-day basis in our personal lives. That's what I'm saying. Because because after, oh, go ahead.
It's the people that surround you are the people that you're gonna be in the trenches with, type thing. You're always gonna, those are the people that are that surround you. If you don't take in where they're at, and I speak to as many people as I possibly can to gauge where they're up to, and that has changed over the last 4 or 5 years. I've spoke with a guy I don't know if you've ever heard of a university in America called Gemstone, but I'm going to be speaking to a guy called Ken who's part of that university. Now he works with UCC filings, which are very interesting over in the States, particularly because you operate a lot under UCC. It's a specific type of legislation. So that's the people, the person who I spoke to who put me in touch with these, they've only been awake, and that's their term that they use, for 4 or 5 years because of COVID. They were just banged up in their own house and they couldn't understand what was going on. And just like many, so I spoke to the people around me, and many did start to wake up to things. But there's always a point where they get to, and then they just think, oh, well, that's it. Where, as Alex says, it's these Russian dolls, Taylor. So I get what you're saying, that there is because it's like you said, just because somebody's saying there's this happening over in Iran, it doesn't mean it is. I get that. Stuff like that, you have no control over. But when it comes to your doorstep, that's the only thing that you do know. So if you do not engage with people who on your doorstep, and you just believe that, well, the bigger narrative's going to come along, and then all of a sudden, when it does come along to your doorstep, you've actually done nothing. Everybody's fell for everything, and you're in the position of what Martin Niemöller was in. So I think you're right in one sense, but you've got to be engaging with the people around you, because that's what shows you in your immediate vicinity. If you were at the back end of the Titanic when they hit the iceberg, you wouldn't think it was sinking until a bit later, would you? So we've got to take all this.
I will say, I will say about that. Our job, and this goes to what you're saying, our job is to become informed, and this is what really annoys me about the people who say, "Oh, you believe in the Q stuff, but it's just Operation Trust. Nothing's happening. Yada yada yada. It just means you'll sit on your ass and do nothing." That's bullshit. Because part of my language. Because our job is to, and I say ours and I do mean ours, so everyone out here, is to inform ourselves and be ready for when any people that we know, or really anyone in our personal lives, comes to us and basically says, "Hey, you have been this crazy conspiracy theorist all these years. You sound like you know what you're talking about, and I'm sorry for making fun of you. Could you please explain this situation to me?" Like, for example, if someone's like coming along and saying, "Oh, why is the media only talking about the Savannah Guthrie thing?" Or why, or something about this whole COVID thing doesn't feel right. Could you, I'm curious what you have to say. So basically, our job is to engage with them on that. But if they try to be aggressive dickheads, pardon my language again, no reason to engage with that. Just bad energy. You know what I'm saying? Just a bad use of your spiritual energy. So
I don't seem to come across. I've just come across people as, "Oh, I'm not interested in that." They're the people I come across, because they don't believe that something like that is happening in the world. They don't believe that your own government would do that.
Well, more and more people, more and more people are coming along. I mean, they're asking questions. Like, for example, about the Clintons, like say, oh, why are the Clintons being linked to Epstein? Why is this Epstein stuff? Why are so many like how are so many famous people linked to this? How deep does this go? Oh, why is for example, why is Israel? All these Israel lovers, asking why is Israel killing innocent people in Gaza and etc. So you know it's tough. We really do have to be patient. And unfortunately, I will say for you guys in the UK is I've mentioned this before that you guys are a lot farther along in terms or rather behind when it comes to this process because you guys are in Europe and well, I guess you're not technically in the European Union anymore. But my point is that you guys in Europe have been libtarded and brainwashed so much more than us over here in the United States that unfortunately it's going to take longer for you guys to be able to really see the benefits of this operation in all its fruit because
But you're saying that if there's going to be fruits from this operation, that's what we're saying. You're saying that we're all so far behind. I speak to people other than you, in America, and they don't say that. They don't say they're that far behind. Canada has told us that we're further in front than them. We haven't got GPs recommending to people who say, well, I don't feel like I want to be here anymore. We don't have GPs going, well, we've got this assisted suicide that you could try. One of my old friends, his auntie, decided to be part of that maids in Canada because she went to a GP and said, I don't want to be here anymore. So they went through the process, found that she was of sound mind, she didn't want to be here, and she was assisted to take her own life on my birthday this year. So we don't have that. So for you to say you're further down the line, we're not. We're not, and it's not just my personal experience from this country. That's why I'm saying you're speaking of a narrative as if it's already done and it's all just playing out. We don't see that, and we see so many variables where this can be stopped. It's people who can see it now. We've had liability orders sorted out. We've had all these other things that are just trenching in. We've got massive solicitors firms committing fraud upon fraud with bailiffs because they're just trying to take as much as they can because they know that time's short. So I think you're right, Taylor. I think there's going to be a big explosion of this, but I don't think that we're further down the pipe than what you are or Canada or even Europe. If you look at Europe, we've not had calls for a caliphate in this country yet, but Germany have. So it's coming, but we're certainly not down at the bottom of the pit with some just yet, pal.
oh Canada, if you ask me, I'm going to be honest with you. I basically consider Canada to be a European country at this point because let's be real here, they basically function under the same rules, the same policies, and really the same. I mean, they're basically connected to the crown in a way anyway. So I feel really bad for Canada right now, honestly. And I'm hoping that things start to change over there real soon because holy crap, is it bad? Maybe they'll finally, maybe this 51st state thing will happen. Although, to be honest, I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want millions and millions of more libtards voting in our elections. That's just me, though. I don't know. But regardless, yeah, like I said, oh man, I feel really bad for Canada, man, right now. But hey, you know, I trust the operation, and they haven't let me down yet. So with that, maybe I want to go ahead and start getting to my stories. And let's see here. I don't know which one I want to start with, but you know what? Let's just go ahead and go with this one right here because I feel like that this has to. This is a interesting. I feel like that this is important when it comes to what's it called? What's it called? When it comes to the when it comes to an agenda that we all have been, unfortunately, that we've been suffering under for quite some time now. I don't know how long it's been going on over there in the UK, but over here it really ramped up in like 2013, 2014, and 2015 under Obama. This nonsensical agenda, but I'm sure that it's been going on over there for around the same time. Do you see? Do you see the? Do you see my shared screen?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, we've talked about this a few times in the past, and this is yet another agenda that has thankfully been pretty much neutered, just like all the others, thanks to the operation. And honestly, I feel like that this was an important one because this agenda right here was one of those probably the biggest cancer to our culture or to Western culture as a whole, going back at least a decade, and really further back, of course. So let's see here. New York Times: Pride flag is removed from Stonewall Monument after Trump directive. The removal of the flag from the Manhattan Monument, the symbolic heart of the gay rights movement, came after a Trump administrative memo about flags at national park sites. Though there's no telling just how fast and how far the difficult defagification of America will progress in this day and age of Q, it is very clear by now that something has changed. The editorial board of the Anti-New York Times first noticed this welcome trend during during last June's Pride Month, and in quotes. For the first time in years, the local Petco and Target stores here in New Jersey were, with the exception of what appeared to be the previous year's inventory, nearly devoid of Satan's wretched 6-color fag flags, God's has 7, in New York City. Corporate donors, no longer intimidated by the dictates of Obama-era ESG investing, pulled out of funding the annual Spectacle of Sodomy March. And now this delightful development from the pits of modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah itself, Greenwich Village. The article explains, quote, a large pride flag was quietly removed from the Stonewall National Monument in Manhattan after a directive from the federal government, the latest step in the Trump administration's nationwide assault on diversity initiatives, and the second time in less than a year it has targeted the Greenwich Village site, which commemorates the birth of the LGBT rights movement. I didn't even know that was the birth of it, but okay. The flag's removal came weeks after the Department of the Interior issued federal guidance on displaying non-agency, quote in quotes, flags in the national park system, which includes a small park in front of the Stonewall Inn, the bar for which the federal monument is named. Elected officials and bar employees said they realized the rainbow flag was gone on Monday morning. On Tuesday, a bare flagpole stood on the monument's grounds as steely clouds hung overhead. Stacy Lentz, an owner of the bar, said its owners have been surprised by the removal. To think you can go to Stonewall and just take down the pride flag. That is telling of the time we are living in bold. And Lentz said, it is unbelievable, end quote. Winning! Editor's note. It was Bill and Hillary Clinton, a lesbian, who designated Stonewall Inn as a National Historic Site in 2000. It was Bathhouse Burial Bongo, a homo, and Big Mike, a tranny, who made it a national monument in 2016. Yep, this was around the time. After a police raid on June 28th, 1969, a series of spontaneous riots, quote unquote, we know they're never spontaneous, and demonstrations erupted at the Stonewall Inn in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. Over the course of the following weeks and months, the homosexual movement formed politically active organizations and established publications that advocated openly for quote-unquote gay rights. This marks the beginning of the perverted cabal's modern LGBT movement, and it is why the month of June was designated Pride Month. Truth be told, Commander Trump himself has not exactly lived out his otherwise accomplished life according to strict perceptions of sexual morality. Married 3 times, he was known to have been quite the New York playboy in his prime and even beyond. Furthermore, he never manifested any degree of disgust with nor hostility toward homosexuality, at least not publicly. To the contrary, Trump seemed as tolerant of New York's homo hordes as most others of his class. But the White Hats are running the government now. While the real Trump is probably out golfing at some obscure and insecure cushy location, the man of the century is carried out his heroic job already and performed it exceptionally well and with dauntless resolve. This is now 100% the operation of the same military intel types, many of them Christians, that recruited Trump as far back as 2011 or even beyond. Therefore, with hopeful, cautious optimism, the editorial board expects that after the long-awaited storm of shocking satanic sexual disclosures regarding children is past, the age of liberal Judaic tolerance for all things sick and twisted will come to an abrupt end. Like an alcoholic or any other compulsive self-destructive type finally hitting rock bottom, public knowledge of the full horror of Epstein/Mossad Island and the Clinton Foundation shipping containers will enable the White Hats to rehabilitate the morally retarded masses through a spiritual revival and a return to God. If the post-storm period does not play out that way, it will represent a lost and irrecoverable opportunity for our world to return to sanity and true happiness, a chance that may never come again. Surely the highly intelligent and historically literate geniuses at White Hat Productions understand this. Let's see what happens. Trust the plan. It's the only way. And here's Q Post 154, November 14th, 2017. We the people who they are afraid of. We the people are who they fear will one day awake. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The kingdom come, that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us for our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. End quote. Q. So, yeah. Oh, my goodness. That's a lot of reading right there. But, I'll add my own little bit here. So, this whole thing, really, this rainbow flag agenda really was pushed out in the forefront over the last few years. Another one that was pushed, over exaggerated into the front by the quote unquote Biden administration for the purpose of really pissing off the public. And a lot of people have been starting to learn this, that a lot of these companies, a lot of these big corporations like Walmart or Target or Petco or Amazon, it's not that they're in favor of it's not that they love the LGBT agenda and that they're just so eager to promote it. A lot of them were forced to do it under duress because BlackRock, which is the largest investment company in the world, as you know, were basically saying, hey, if you don't get on board this social agenda, you might not get some funding for your corporation. You might end up losing a lot of profits, and you might even possibly go under. So, and this goes back to what Q said many times, that not everyone in this cabal, in this politician, in this crowd, is evil. Many he even says that a good number of them are not, and are only going along with the agenda because they're forced to. And I bring this up because this is important for a lot of people to understand, is that a lot of these people, some of these people that we've grown to hate may not be as evil as we think they are. Maybe they were just, it's hard to say which one is which, but many of them were just threatened or blackmailed. Like, say, for example, if they fell asleep in a bed and they woke up and a kid was next to them because like some Epstein type person put him there, and then a picture was taken, and then the photographer's like, if you don't do what we say, we'll show this to the media and your life will be ruined. You'll be called a pedophile and all that. Or
I think that's done.
And yeah, that's the case for a lot of people. And then another one is, okay, you do what we say and you'll have a nice happy life. You'll be big, you'll be famous. If you don't do what we say, we'll put you in jail or kill you, and we'll kill you, and we'll kill your family as well. We'll kidnap your family. We'll give them to some child molesters or rapists, etc. So, in that kind of situation, it's like, what are you supposed to do? You know what I mean? It's like, if you're told to go along with what we say, or we'll kill your family and rape your children and kill them, like, what are you supposed to do? You know what I mean?
You finished? Is that the end of your presentation?
For that one, yeah. But I obviously I have other articles, but before I do that, I wanted to get your thoughts on what the so far.
Anything to say on that, Alex?
Not at this point.
Okay. So the point of that last article really was just to showcase just how neuter the Pride agenda really has become, which is honestly really good because, and also it shows you just how over exaggerated and just how pushed out into the open and into the narrative space the last 4 years have been. Because people are saying, oh, the last 4 years everything was all LGBT and pride and rainbow flags, and it's like it wasn't really as much as you'd think. It's just that the media was heavily exaggerating it for the sake of, again, controversy creates conversation. You piss people off by shoving all this stuff in their face up in the forefront, just like with people like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Zoran Mandami. You push all of these communist agendas up into the front of of people's faces, and they're forced to confront it and decide whether they like it or not. So, yeah, it really shows that this that this is a multifaceted agenda, killing every single thing that the deep state has been doing to us for really the last few centuries at least. The climate change agenda is another one, but this is one of the reasons why I always say that to the people who say, oh, nothing's happened. And it's like, yeah, plenty of things have actually happened. Which is actually what I like to try to focus on when it comes to the Q stuff. Is I like to try to focus on what you can tangibly say has happened, because at the end of the day, we can't see the future. We know where the operation is going, but we can't say exactly just how it's going. Like all the steps and stuff that's going along with it. It's like a movie. You don't know what each twist is going to be like. But let's go ahead and talk about this next article. This is another agenda that has been gutted, that the deep state has been pushing onto us for quite a long time, but has thankfully been neutered. And this is important too, because this is something that I feel like has been just as important as both the financial stuff, so the central banks, and also the mainstream media, and that is the university system, where they have been corrupting and brainwashing our children and youth for decades. This has been very, very important and powerful to the cabal, because as you know, you get to these kids, these 19, 20-year-olds, and nowadays it's even younger, the middle school and high school kids, you go and brainwash them into thinking that they're special and that they're going to be that they know better than their elders, and to be progressive and go out there and say, oh, we're gonna do all this progressive nonsense, all this liberal nonsense. It's very powerful. But continuing, New York Times: professors are being watched. We've never seen this much surveillance. Scrutiny of university classrooms is being formalized, with new laws requiring professors to post syllabuses and tip lines for students to complain. This is big. In the United States, what the Marxists refer to as the long march through the institutions started in a seemingly incessant innocent manner during the quote-unquote progressive era. So, yeah, a little over a century ago. One of the first ones being Teddy Roosevelt. By the 1950s, the penetration of the university facilities had reached such a level that the great Senator Joseph McCarthy warned about its continued spread. And by the 1980s, my Rutgers days, the Red professors had established a dominance so complete that they could openly grade down and even publicly abuse a wayward student of the student body, right, quote unquote. One can only imagine how even worse the situation had deteriorated since in the last 40 years. But as is the case in so many other areas in this day and age of Q, here too we begin to witness the weakening of the old guard. The article describes the winning. Quote, college professors once taught free from political interference, with mostly their students and colleagues privy to their lectures and book assignments. Now they are being watched by state officials, senior administrators, and students themselves. In Oklahoma, a student disputed an instructor's grading decision, drawing the notice of a conservative campus group, Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's group, the Q, that has long posted the names of professors criticized for bringing liberal politics into their classrooms. the instructor was removed. In Texas, a student recorded a classroom lesson on gender identity that led to viral outrage and the instructor's firing. Now, Texas has set up an office to take other complaints about colleges and professors. End quote. Let me just add a little bit here. And so this is something that I really feel like is, before I continue, this is something that really annoyed me so much about these colleges. And thankfully, I only went to a community college for a few months before I ended up dropping out. Although back then it was because I wasn't doing too good. But regardless, you know, I'm sure you guys. Wait, actually, hold on. Let me ask. Did you guys go to college / university?
No.
No. Okay. What about you, Alex?
Did you, Alex? Alex?
He may not be there.
Well, no, we didn't. I think Alex might have.
Okay. Well, the point is that what happens is that, and I'm sure you've even noticed it when you were in high school and stuff, is that even if you're not taking a social science degree or anything like that, even if you're just taking like a math class or something like that, something that has nothing to do with politics or anything, you'll still get your professor, your teacher. Maybe they'll spend 10 minutes a day, like once in a while, rambling on about what's going on in the world with a liberal spin on it, basically saying, oh my God, did you guys hear about what ICE was doing to those people in Minnesota? Yeah, it's so horrible, and it brainwashes these gullible kids who end up falling for it, and and that's not even telling us to what happens in all of these social classes, these the ones where they just where they specifically taught about this stuff. So this was a big initiative that's been going on for a long time. But continuing, oh, the winning and the whining, a taste of your own medicine, professors. Be afraid, commies. Be very afraid. We would say that the quote unquote late Charlie Cork, upon reading this news, is smiling down from up above, but he's actually not up above. Nonetheless, he's surely gloating from ear to ear from somewhere on a golf course at some witness protection facility. Before the Jewish cabal discovered him and skyrocketed his quote-unquote progressive political career, the despicable Professor Woodrow Wilson, income tax, the Fed, World War I, Treaty of Versailles, etc., was a Princeton professor egghead. This was over 100 years ago. He was one of these, Wilson was one of these quote-unquote progressive professors. Indiana University professor Ben Robinson was recently reprimanded after a conservative student filed a complaint saying he talked about his personal politics in a class about German culture. Oh, I can't imagine what he was talking about. The Nazis, they were evil. They killed Jews. Oh my God. That kind of thing, most likely. The late, quote unquote, Charlie Kirk's nationwide student organization has got the commie professors worried for their jobs now. Also in recent years, and also not by accident, there has occurred among your average conservatives a fair amount of long overdue rehabilitation regarding the unjustly stained name of the aforementioned Joe McCarthy. At a time when the Marxist penetration, though notable, was not at all pervasive, St. Joseph of Wisconsin, that's the title of the book, sounded the alarm about what he referred to as communist-minded teachers. In the most well-known case, Julius Halevati, I probably mispronounced that, cough, aka Jewish, a highly regarded, in quotes, math teacher at Bronx High School of Science, was interrogated by McCarthy in 1953 for his past involvement with a communist front called the American Labor Party. The fear of being interviewed by McCarthy himself or exposed by some local anti-communist patriots had the temporary effect of causing such characters to lay low, lest they be investigated and possibly lose a position. Indeed, about 600 red teachers ended up being dismissed during this glorious period. It is interesting to note that the two globalists who used the office of the presidency to finally derail the McCarthy hearings and deliberately dampen the spirit of American anti-communism had both previously served as presidents of various universities at varying times. They were President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Columbia University, and his quote-unquote closest advisor and younger brother, Milton Eisenhower, Johns Hopkins, Kansas State, and Penn State. Deep state quackademia was as important to the New World Order cabal as fake news and Hollywood. And now, thankfully, all those institutions are being stripped of their power and to do further harm. Nonetheless, plenty of work remains to be done in healing up the enormous mental and moral damage which these deceitful devils have caused. Trust the plan. And here's a quote by McCarthy. Quote, to a communist-minded teacher, academic freedom means their right to force you to accept what they want to teach your children. End quote. And I couldn't have said that any better myself. That is a damn good quote. McCarthy's targeting of the communist Julius Halivity led to him being dismissed from his position at the Bronx High School of Science. Naturally, the deep state left took care of him and got Halivity employed at Columbia University's prestigious Teachers College. It's crazy. Get a copy or a PDF of St. Joseph of Wisconsin, an American hero who warns that high-minded pleas for academic freedom were actually a cover to conceal the unfolding Marxist penetration of the nation's colleges. His heroic efforts were ultimately thwarted, and he was later murdered by the Eisenhower brothers. Ike, the grandstanding poser, got to dress up and play the part of intellectual while serving as the no-show president of Communist Columbia University for almost 5 years. Ike's openly globalist brother, Milton, served as president of Kansas State, Pennsylvania State, and Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins of COVID fame, by the way, just want to mention. He was also the head of the U.S. delegation to the United States Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. And I should also add that Milton Eisenhower, Ike's younger brother, he was also in FDR State Department during the 30s and 40s, and which is known openly as being infested with commies, and he was one of the highest ranking ones. And also, I should also mention that Milton was, along with Malcolm Moose, were the ones that wrote Eisenhower's famous speech about the military-industrial complex. So it tells you a lot about what that speech was actually talking about. But yeah, so that's another thing about a lot of these teachers up for decades, is that even when they were exposed as commies and far-left lunatics, even if they would quote-unquote lose their job, what would happen is that they would just get boosted by the cabal to even higher positions of authority and power, because they take care of themselves like that. So I just hope that I showed you guys exactly just what this really meant, like when it comes to just how pertinent and just how pervasive this whole academic institutions were when it comes to the psychology of the American public. Because they would train these kids, as I mentioned before, train them to be commies. A lot of them would go on to these quote unquote prestigious institutions, and even possibly join places like the Council on Foreign Relations, or the Bilderberg Group, or the Trilateral Commission, etc. And they would end up becoming high-ranking politicians, or media moguls, or corporate heads, etc. And even the ones that don't rise up that high, they end up becoming the heads of various other professions that brainwash the public into believing these commie agendas. So, I hope I thoroughly explained just how important it is that this whole institution has been neutered and destroyed, just like the LGBT agenda.
Fair enough, mate. Can't say fairer than that. Well, what do you think about Trump? I know you have mentioned about that God should be back in the schools, but Trump is now saying that God will be back in the schools, because you need religion and you need God. Mine and Alex's question might be which God, but what do you think of that? Have you seen the reports of it?
Well, first of all, let me just say, well, actually, the first of all thing again, let me just say that I think that's absolutely amazing, because this is something that definitely obviously needs to happen. Now you could argue, oh, which religion, which God, etc., etc. But one step at a time, as I say. Because at the end of the day, I think it's good that first we just get to that whole spiritual argument in general before getting to any of the nitpicky stuff in it, or rather any individual takes, because just getting any kind of spirituality and the Bible, etc., back in school already is a big step. And I'll give a little bit of history on that. So for the longest time, for like 200 years, it was normal in pretty much every school in America to teach kids about the Bible and God, etc., because this was a Christian country, and kids would be required to recite Bible verses every single day. What happened was that during the 50s, during pretty much the takeover of America, when the previous Supreme Court justice, I forget his name, when he died mysteriously, most likely murdered via poison, Allen Dulles' CIA. When he passed away, Eisenhower, another one of the most disgusting presidents we've ever had, a hardcore communist, globalist, deep state puppet, he appointed Earl Warren as head of the Supreme Court, and people, and if you look into the Warren Court, it's infamous for being hardcore commie, far left, libtarded garbage. And the Warren Court actually was the one that pushed and ultimately forced the school system in America, the education system, to stop teaching about God and the Bible. And this ultimately happened in 1963, when unfortunately JFK was forced to announce that to the nation, which is interesting because this is also the same time that Vatican II happened as well, around the same time. So this was a huge attack on religion and spirituality in general. And of course, the timing is very convenient as well, isn't it? Because 1963, this was right before all the civil rights era riots and the LGBT stuff of the 60s, the feminism and all that really started to kick off. So these people timed it perfectly. They got God out of the schools right before they implemented the commie hippie movement of the mid to late 1960s. So they had this all planned right from the start. And
how you said we were further down the line back in the 60s, mate, when you had all religion taken out of schools, you were way ahead of us. I was still being taught scripture at school, but we didn't do all that kind of pledging and stuff. But we had prayers and everything in the 70s and into the 80s and 90s. I'm not sure what it's like now because it's all multi-faith. I know people who go to so-called Christian schools, and the Board of Governors say that they don't need to teach more about Jesus because they've got the balance right. Well, you're not a Christian school, then. We've got to call a spade a spade. Well, the reason I asked that, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, what's worse, that or the churches that have the fucking rainbow flags up? Pardon my language. Just, oh my God.
It was the beginning. It was the beginning of it. What they did to America with the colleges and that is what Women's Lib did to bring all that stuff in. I speak with feminists now. We were, hardcore feminists from the 60s and 70s, and they can't believe what is here now because they didn't expect that. They just wanted more rights. Well,
exactly.
That's it. That's how people use. But this is why I bring it up.
The cabal is. Let's see.
Be a great nation. You have to have religion. You have to have it. You have to have faith. You have to have God.
President Trump pointed to a spiritual revival in America, celebrating what he called a resurgence of faith.
Some churches are seeing a 30%, 50%, or even 70% increase
in the number of converts and also the number of people going to church every week.
In honor of this renewal and ahead of the nation's upcoming 250th anniversary, the president announced a major prayer event to be held on the National Mall.
I'm pleased to announce that on May 17th, 2026, that we're inviting Americans from all across the country to come together on our National Mall to pray, to give thanks, and we are going to do something that everyone said, like, that's tough. We're going to rededicate America as one nation under God.
In a second announcement, the president said the Department of Education is officially issuing new guidance to protect the right of prayer in public schools.
Prayers strengthen, prayers heal, prayer empowers, and prayer saves. Quite simply, prayer is America's superpower.
The president's speech came a day after another gathering was held in conjunction with the National Prayer Breakfast at the Museum of the Bible. Members of Congress, state leaders, and faith leaders coming together for the national gathering for prayer and repentance.
Your word promises us, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sins and will heal their land. We are coming in that prayer and asking and confident that you will fulfill your promise.
Looking ahead to the rededication of America as one nation under God, organizers say the event will allow people to reflect on the relationship between faith and our nation's history and to come together for times of prayer, praise, and thanksgiving. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
It's time to go back to our history, and our history is founded in the Mayflower Compact, that in the name of God and for his glory, we come together for this. Let's go back to the first English settlers that landed at Cape Henry right here in Virginia Beach. They brought a cross with them. Just start thinking about the intent there. They didn't do this, last second. This would be a good idea. They brought a cross with them on board a very tiny ship. And the purpose of that cross was to dedicate this land to the glory of God. They didn't bring an English flag. Just start thinking of that what their first thing they did when they saw land, they had a chaplain with them, and the chaplain said, I've observed you over the months of this journey, and you guys are not ready. And so he called for a fast. He called for a time of repentance. And until he was satisfied that their spiritual state was ready, then he said, we are going to take communion on board this ship. And that's what they did. And then they landed. And the first thing they did was bow before a cross and say, we dedicate this land to Jesus Christ. They didn't dedicate it to the King of England. They dedicated it to the King of Kings. In our generation, isn't it wonderful that we can do that again? We can say, Lord, we've turned away from you. We've somehow in our vanity think that all the blessings that we have in America are somehow related to our own effort or to our national resources or to our democracy or to our wonderful economy or our wonderful military. We start to think these vain thoughts. All of the blessings that we enjoy are because of God Almighty. And because of that compact made on the Mayflower, that kneeling on a beach in Virginia so long ago, these blessings all flow from that. Were we perfect for these 400 years? Absolutely not. But what a wonderful legacy that we can come back and rededicate and say, Lord God Almighty, could you heal our land? Could you bring us not just to this aspiration that we're one nation under God, indivisible? Can we make it real, and can we make it in our generation? That's a wonderful thing. We're going to be bringing you more on how to pray for the nation, how to pray for your family, your church, your neighborhood, your city, your state, but especially for the United States of America. In these turbulent times where the political divide seems so wide, Let's come together in prayer, reaching across to one another, saying, can we be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice?
That was a that was a damn good video. I'm not gonna lie, that was a damn good clip. Very.
Turn to idolatry and go all the way down. This is where it gets really interesting. It has been a question whether the Hebrews did not so lapse into idolatry and to lose all knowledge of the true God. They lost the true sound of his name, for which we now substitute Jehovah. They may have only mingled foreign rites with the true worship, as many pagan ideas are now adopted into some branches of the Christian church. We know the Hebrews worshiped the sun, Baal, moon, Astarte, Diana, the stars, in Job, planets, Chum, and Rephan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but now that is known. That symbol for Rephan is used for the Star of David currently. Saturn in Acts, and many representations of celestial bodies and ideas in human form for worship as of the sun, moon, stars, Hera, Diana. Let me see, keep on going. Also images of the beast, Psalms, Aaron and Jeroboam calf. So it shows right here that the Hebrews from God used today in the Christian church comes from paganism. So here I have an old.
So the reason I wanted to put that little bit together was. So, sorry, Alex, I'll just have to mute you while you're not speaking, because there's loads of feedback coming from your mic. So, yeah, you were right that it's been ripped out of school and colleges in the 60s. 60 years later, they're bragging about it all coming back. Trump is saying one country under God. He already says that he isn't a Christian. He doesn't follow Jesus. The people with the small hats in this film are playing really prominent positions, and they all hail Trump as Cyrus the Great. So this is why, especially now we see the Star of David, where this truly comes from. The Star of Remphan, you're going all the way back to Baal worship, where the Hebrews lost their way, and they've still lost their way, and they're still looking for the wrong Messiah. The ones that rejected Christ are the ones that have these little hats on that are playing a part in all this game. So I wanted to, we've only got 10 minutes left, so I don't want to go in depth on this. We'll do it next week. But I just want your opinion, Taylor. I know you don't really do much about religion, but the reason why I ask your opinion is because you don't do any religion and you don't, I mean, I know that you believe in God, but you don't, for want of a better way of putting it, which God, but you know there is a God. But the reason I ask you for your opinion, mate, is because there's a lot of people that are like you. I was like you, not knowing what God and things like that. So it's still important, mate. So what would your position be?
Well, I believe that that the first thing, as I mentioned before, the first thing that needs to be done is just bringing religion and God and spirituality back into school and universities, just all together. And then if you want to get into the different finites about which faith should you practice or which version of which faith you should practice, I feel like that should come down to different areas. I feel like that should come down to different people's interpretations. And I feel like people should be given a choice. But I do understand that some faiths are obviously not exactly pure, to say the least. But I will say that, baby steps are not even baby steps, really. Steps are steps that need to be taken. And I don't hate Muslims, I don't hate Jews, and I don't even there's not really any faith particular faith that I can't that I despise with a passion, except for maybe the Talmud. But regardless, the the best way I can to answer that directly, the best way I can really say is, let's bring the different faiths back into school and introduce people to each of them and see which one that they best identify with, and really just go from there. If I had to choose, I would say that obviously you bring the Bible back, of course, the most authentic version of the Bible, and then because this is a Christian country, and then if you want to get into the Quran or whatever else afterwards, I feel like that should be your choice if you're interested, like a secondary option, for example. But the main thing that should be required is, of course, the Bible. As true to the original translation as possible. I don't know if it's the King James version or whatever. Obviously, not the Schofield reference Bible. that's we can agree on that one. Not the freaking Schofield Bible. Oh my goodness.
Well, I have to say, there's no second Bibles or second chances with this stuff. If the Bible, what you said, bring in first, if the Bible, the Word of God, is true, then everything else is anathema. Everything else should not be even considered, because you said consider something else. But if the other thing is, if you're going to consider something else, then you would have to hope that the Word of God isn't true, and then we can just do whatever we want. But it seems to be that there's a lot of people who've sacrificed themselves in many ways to try and get the information out that, there is only one way out of this mess. And, the mess is quite deep, but there is one way out. If you think there's multiple ways out, or you can get out yourself, then I think, I would have carried on trying to crack on and do that. But when you realise that if the Word of God is true and the world that we're around us is what it says in the Bible, and I have to say that what I've been taught about this world has been all full of lies and wrong, so I had to start again. And starting back with the Bible, if that was true, and I didn't know it was true until I read it and I was born again, and now I just can't get away from it. It makes sense. Old Testament, New Testament, all the languages, all the translations, all the, how it corroborates itself. It's just not a confusing book, not confusing documents at all. You can just read it and just let it tell you. Don't go in with those preconceived ideas that we all do. I fortunately didn't have a dogma of a religion, but I was still taught bits that everybody knows. Lucifer and Satan are the same. We were all taught that. But when you read the Word of God, it's just not. So have you got anything to wrap up then, Taylor?
Well, let me just say that.
First of all,
I'm not gonna say that this time. You all, to follow me, go to my Rumble page, the Raconteurs Report. I just finished my side of the story, which basically covers all of Hitler's major speeches that he gave during from 1939 until the end of the war, and giving the right perspective on them. And I've covered many other books from different topics, 9/11, JFK, etc., etc. I want to do more interviews, but unfortunately, trying to get people, trying to contact people for interviews isn't exactly the easiest thing to do, and most people just don't tend to respond, unfortunately. But I'm trying. Anyway, if you want to get hold of me directly, my Gmail is chimpyskippy@gmail.com, and my YouTube is also the Raconteurs Report, just as you can see in the chat. Unfortunately, I haven't really been uploading much onto it just because I'm afraid of YouTube nuking me again. But I might try again just because we're in big 2026 now, so maybe the standards will have loosened up a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, so please try to support me and my work as well as Webby, of course. But all I can really say is, I'm trying my best, and I appreciate the support.
That's all we ask, brother. That's all we ask is be open-minded, critically think, and do your best. That's all we can do. We've all been taught a lot of lies, and there's still a lot more information to be found out. And as God says, that there's nothing that's hidden that will not be shown. That's good and bad. So I think we're on the right track. Keep going, Taylor. Thanks for your time, mate. I'll speak to you through the week and see you next week.
All right. If you don't mind, before I go, could I ask one more question? And it's a quick one. It's like a yes or no question.
Just be quick.
All right. Would you be for like would you want the whole the public, everyone, to see Frazzle Drip on television?
Nobody knows what that means, Taylor. I'm telling you, hardly anybody over here knows what that means, Frazzle Drip. You'd have to explain what Frazzle Drip was.
Okay.
Do that next week because we're going to go off.
Okay.
All right, mate.
All right. See you guys next week. And thanks again.
No worries, mate. God bless.
God bless.
Alex, try your mic, mate. Oh, I can hear yourself.
Yeah, I thought I'd come on video as well at the end.
What have you got to say? What do you think?
What I'm going to say is that last video that you showed about Israel and Baal. I just wanted to make a comment really about covenants, because we've talked about contracts as a contrast to covenants and agreements, and of course covenant is sometimes translated testaments, as in like will and testaments. So interestingly, with a covenant, believe it or not, it can be unilaterally initiated. And when you look at Abraham, who became Abraham, God didn't say, "Hi, Abraham, get up from where you are and go to this land I'm going to show you. If you'd like to make a covenant with me, then you can do that." He just commanded him to do it. And then Abraham fulfilled that in obedience, and he was taught faith along the way. But we tend to think that covenants are a bit like agreements or contracts where two people agree. And it seems like common sense, but actually sometimes it isn't, especially if God makes a covenant. It's a bit like a promise or a legacy that he's going to give you, whether you like it or not. And I don't think we tend to think of that in terms of Calvinism and, being elected to damnation or being elected to salvation. But I think sometimes you have this idea that God wants to bless. It tells you that covenants can be sticky. And I think the point with Israel and the Jews, as we like to say, is that the covenant that God made with Abraham and all the way through the patriarchal narratives, even when they've not fulfilled it, even when they've run towards Baal and other gods, no matter what they do, God made a covenant with them. And that's sticky. And that means, this is one of the reasons why we keep having this drama around the Holy Land and Israel, because people might think, well, what's so special about these lot, especially if they've sold out for so long? Why is God so bothered? They're just like anybody else that doesn't believe in him. Why does God give them special treatment? The reason is because he set his love upon them. And ultimately, God's not into failed projects. He gives us free will, but God doesn't leave loose ends. And this is why ultimately, no matter what happens with Israel, we can't get away from the stickiness that around that region, aligned with that people that name Yahweh officially, even though there are deviations, there's going to be this pulling of everything together, all the loose ends being brought together. And we typically think of that as, you know, the final battle, the final point before Jesus returns. But the Apostle Paul talks about it as well in Romans 11, that God's going to turn his attention back to Israel, and those who have been of that old covenant faith, many of them are going to recognize Christ. So that's definitely interesting, because no matter how far they've gone, and they've gone into forms of Zionism that are all about the state and the nation of Israel, and they've moved away from God more and more. And I mentioned the other week about the Bar Kokhba revolt, you know, and the hassle that Hadrian then sort of tied up in 135 CE. It lasted 3.5 years. Funnily enough, like from AD 66 to AD 70, 3.5 years. You look at Daniel's 7-year period, it's very interesting that those two Jewish uprisings that were finally put down by the Romans, were both put down after 3.5 years. But they've continued on a path, getting further and further and further away from the one who made covenant with them. But in the end, it's like Coronation Street, isn't it? It's like a good soap opera. At the end of the day, it's all going to come back to where it started. So that's where we need to focus our attention. God's not going to let his covenant go lightly. Even though he made the fulfilled covenant, the new covenant in Christ, he is not going to leave Israel in that state of unbelief forever. He'll bring it round and he'll tie up the loose ends.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely going to bring it down to tie up the loose ends. I'll just leave you with it, unless you've summed it up. But I'll just leave you to tie up now. I've had to mute your mic because otherwise I get a load of feedback for some reason. So if you just want to wrap up, Alex.
Yeah. Ultimately, it doesn't change much from week to week. Lots of things happen, but not much changes. We've got to, you know, lay out a position, set out a stall, stand for something. But I don't think that means we need to stamp our feet and follow every little rabbit hole that crops up. And there's going to be more, you know, week in, week out. It's theatre, as we know. And I think the key is to watch these things in a dispassionate way, to not start, you know, getting carried away, even with truth, because the point about truth is it's the best decoy, isn't it? You know, if something's true, it can decoy you from other things you need to be looking at. Hey, look at this true thing over here. Look at that. Look at it. Just follow that. That's true, isn't it? Everyone's, yeah, that's really true. You know, and look at that. Look at it. And if that's true, then all these other things are the case. And you're just traveling further and further down a road that many things are true, but not all true things are relevant. So we need truth and relevance in order to have real meaning, direction, and purpose in our life, mate.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Alex. Thanks to everybody in the chat room. It's been quite busy in there again tonight. Thanks if you've made it to the end live. Thank you very much. We don't come here and sit here and do it for nothing. It's, as Alex said at the start, we've got a small platform that people can hear. Maybe 200 to 300 people a week are looking and listening, and you know, you can't unhear something that you've heard. You've got to maybe challenge yourself and go and check whether that information's true or not. But that's what you must do. Go, come back, and then we talk, we discuss, and iron sharpens iron. Praise in the chat room is going to hopefully come on next week and be able to show us information where the joint gyro that I used, simple sign and date, give it back. He can show us legislation where it'll show us how to get to this account of ours and be able to take control of it. So hopefully that's going to be much easier than what it would have been for me to go and sue a £3.4 billion company, which it would have worked. But, you know, when you've had armed police come after you and you've had all other kinds done, sometimes it's just nice to be able to not keep looking over your shoulder. Back then, there was nobody else to pass a baton on to, but there's loads of people now. And everybody knows that the economy is tanking. Everybody knows that there's something wrong. Everybody knows that we can't afford to keep paying. So we need to know why. We need to know what we've done and why we've done it. But nobody was interested. When somebody said that you shouldn't pay bills, I said, why? He said, because it's a debt-based economy. I went, what does that mean? He says, well, you're a creditor. Yeah? Well, creditors set off bills and don't pay. I went, oh, well, what does a creditor do? Set off. Yeah, but what does that mean? Showed me that check, signed, date, it's done. I went, that can't be that easy. He says, that's how it's meant to work. When I did it, then I saw how they couldn't let me win. So we've got a guy, Praise in the chat room is saying that he's been successful for over a year. So that'll be great information for people who are now struggling to be able to pick that button up and go and sort it out for themselves. It's what we've been taught. We've been groomed into a weak society to be weak people, but we think we're clever because we know things. Oh, well, that's APR 2.3 and I've got it for it doesn't matter. We've all been ripped off. We've got to be humble. Sometimes, though, you've got to be humbled in order to be humble. Hopefully, we're getting to a turning point. We're getting to a turning point. Those spiritual blocks are being laid. Depends on who's winning. But, you know, we've got to be honest with ourselves. Do we know everything? Do we know what we're doing? The answer's no. We've just got to see what we can do ourselves. Thanks to everybody. Now, God bless. See you next week.
Thank you.